The message that changed everything. The Kelthran Empire had existed for 50,000 years. They ruled over 200 star systems with absolute authority. Their military fleets numbered in the thousands. Their technology was so advanced that they could destroy entire planets with a single weapon. They had never lost a war. They had never retreated from any conflict. They were the supreme power in the galaxy, and every species knew it. Admiral Zethus commanded the Empire's First Contact Division. He was ancient even by Kelthran standards, having lived for nearly 800 years. His scales had turned silver with age, and his eyes carried the wisdom of countless diplomatic encounters. He had made first contact with 47 different species throughout his career. Some had joined the Empire willingly. Others had been conquered. All had eventually submitted to Kelthran authority. It was simply the natural order of things. When the detection arrays picked up artificial signals from a previously unknown system, Zethus treated it as routine business. Another primitive species had discovered radio technology. Another group of simple creatures would soon learn their place in the galactic hierarchy. He dispatched a standard reconnaissance fleet to investigate. 3 warships, each carrying enough firepower to level a continent. It was considered polite restraint by Kelthran standards. The system they entered was unremarkable. A yellow star with 8 planets. The 3rd planet showed signs of industrial civilization. Primitive fusion reactors. Basic orbital satellites. Chemical rockets that barely reached their own moon. Zethus reviewed the preliminary scans with mild interest. These creatures called themselves humans. They had only recently developed faster-than-light communication. They had no idea that their radio signals had been echoing across the galaxy for decades, announcing their presence to species far beyond their comprehension. The Kelthran fleet approached the human home world slowly. They wanted to be seen. They wanted to inspire awe and fear. It was part of the standard protocol. Show overwhelming force. Demonstrate absolute superiority. Accept their surrender. Move on to the next system. Captain Torvak commanded the lead warship. He had performed this ritual dozens of times. He opened a communication channel using the translation matrix that had been programmed with the human language from their radio broadcasts. His message was simple and direct. The Kelthran Empire had claimed this system. All human military forces would stand down immediately. All orbital facilities would be surrendered. All governments would acknowledge Kelthran authority. Resistance would result in immediate destruction. Compliance would result in integration into the Empire as a subordinate species. They had 24 hours to respond. The human response came within 3 hours. It was not a surrender. It was not a negotiation. It was a single transmission from Earth's Unified Defense Command. The message contained only 7 words, but those 7 words would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. The message said this: "We respectfully decline your generous offer." Captain Torvak stared at the communication screen in confusion. He had expected panic. He had expected desperate pleas for mercy. He had expected immediate capitulation. He had never, in his entire career, received a polite rejection. He forwarded the message to Admiral Zethus, certain that there must be some translation error. Perhaps these humans did not understand the situation. Perhaps they needed a demonstration of Kelthran power. Admiral Zethus read the message 3 times. His tactical officers waited in silence, unsure how to proceed. Finally, Zethus gave the order. Destroy one of their orbital stations. Not the largest one. Not a civilian target. Just a small military satellite. Something that would demonstrate capability without causing excessive casualties. A warning shot. A reminder of reality. The kind of thing that always brought primitive species to their senses. The targeting systems locked onto a human military satellite orbiting their moon. It was a small facility, probably housing no more than 50 personnel. The weapons array charged. The crew prepared to fire. Then something impossible happened. The satellite moved. Not slowly. Not with conventional thrusters. It simply vanished from its position and reappeared 10,000 kilometers away in the space of a single heartbeat. The Kelthran targeting computer lost lock. Warning alarms sounded across the bridge. Captain Torvak demanded an explanation from his sensor team. They had no explanation to give. Human technology should not have been capable of that kind of movement. Their ships used chemical rockets. Their satellites were primitive metal boxes held together with welds and rivets. They should not have been able to perform instantaneous position changes that defied every known principle of physics. Yet they had done exactly that. The sensor officer reported something else. The satellite had not just moved. It had armed weapons. Weapons that the initial scans had completely failed to detect. Weapons that were now pointing directly at the Kelthran warship. Captain Torvak ordered evasive maneuvers, but he was not particularly worried. Human weapons technology was centuries behind Kelthran capabilities. Their most powerful explosives were crude fusion devices. Nothing that could threaten a ship protected by energy shields designed to withstand stellar radiation. The human satellite fired. The weapon was not a missile. It was not a beam. It was something else entirely. Something that bypassed the shields as if they did not exist. Something that struck the Kelthran warship with enough force to tear through its hull plating like paper. The impact killed 17 crew members instantly. It crippled the ship's main reactor. It left the massive warship drifting dead in space with its systems failing one by one. Admiral Zethus watched from his flagship as the pride of the Kelthran fleet became a floating wreck in less than 5 seconds. His crew stood at their stations in shocked silence. In 50,000 years of empire, no primitive species had ever drawn blood in a first contact scenario. No newly discovered race had ever possessed weapons capable of threatening Kelthran warships. It was impossible. It violated everything they knew about technological development. Yet the evidence floated before them, spinning slowly in the void with emergency lights flickering across its damaged hull. The second human transmission arrived moments later. The voice was calm, almost apologetic. It belonged to someone who identified himself as General Marcus Webb, commander of Earth's System Defense Force. He expressed regret for the loss of Kelthran life. He stated that the attack had been purely defensive in nature. He offered to provide medical assistance to the damaged ship. Then he added something that made Admiral Zethus feel an emotion he had not experienced in centuries. Fear. General Webb said that the weapon used had been set to minimal power. He said that Earth possessed 1,200 similar satellites positioned throughout the solar system. He said that humanity had been aware of the Kelthran Empire for nearly 30 years, ever since they had intercepted Kelthran communications during an expansion campaign in a neighboring sector. He said that humanity had been preparing for this moment since then. Preparing, studying, and building defenses specifically designed to counter Kelthran technology. Then General Webb said something that would be quoted in every military academy in the galaxy for the next 1,000 years. He said that humanity did not want war. He said that Earth would welcome peaceful diplomatic relations with the Kelthran Empire. He said that humans respected strength and admired the Empire's achievements. But he also said this. He said that humanity had spent its entire existence fighting. Fighting nature. Fighting disease. Fighting each other. Fighting to survive on a planet that tried to kill them in 1,000 different ways. He said that war was not something humans feared. It was something they understood better than any species in the galaxy. The Council's emergency session. The emergency council meeting was called within 6 hours of the incident. Representatives from every major power in the galaxy gathered through quantum communication links. The Kelthran Empire, humiliated but pragmatic, shared everything they knew about the encounter. The council chamber fell silent as the battle recordings played. Veteran admirals from a dozen species watched in disbelief as a single human satellite crippled a Kelthran warship with a weapon that should not have existed. Counselor Vresh of the Talmari Federation spoke first. Her species had been spacefaring for 20,000 years. They had seen the rise and fall of empires. They had witnessed technological revolutions and devastating wars. She had personally negotiated peace treaties that ended conflicts spanning centuries. She had never seen anything like this. Her question was simple and direct. How did a species that barely left their own solar system develop weapons capable of penetrating Kelthran shields? The Kelthran military intelligence officer who answered was a young commander named Rethak. He had spent the past 6 hours analyzing every scrap of data from the encounter. His report was disturbing. According to his analysis, the human weapon operated on principles that were theoretically sound but practically impossible. It generated localized spatial distortions that created temporary weak points in shield matrices. The technology required computational power far beyond what humanity should have possessed. It required materials science that should have taken centuries to develop. It required a fundamental understanding of physics that most species did not achieve until they had been exploring space for millennia. The question was not how humans had developed one advanced technology. The question was how they had developed dozens of them simultaneously while maintaining the appearance of primitive civilization. Their cities still burned fossil fuels for energy. Their population still suffered from diseases that had been eradicated in most spacefaring societies thousands of years ago. Their governments still engaged in economic competition and territorial disputes. They looked and acted like a species that had just discovered fire. Yet they possessed weapons that could threaten the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Ambassador Kelvin Chen arrived at the council station 3 days after the incident. He was the first human to attend a galactic council meeting. He was relatively young by the standards of most species present, only 43 years old. He wore a simple black suit rather than any kind of military uniform. He carried no weapons and brought no guards. He entered the council chamber alone and took his seat without ceremony or fanfare. The assembled representatives studied him carefully. Humans were physically unremarkable. Average height. Average build. Their senses were limited. Their natural lifespans were brief. They had no claws, no armor, no natural weapons of any kind. They were prey species by every standard definition. Yet this prey species had just bloodied the nose of the galaxy's apex predator, and they had done it with weapons that defied conventional understanding. The council chairman, an ancient being named Orthex who belonged to a species so old that their original home world had been forgotten, opened the session with formal protocol. He welcomed Ambassador Chen and expressed hope for peaceful relations. He also requested, in diplomatic terms, an explanation for the unprovoked attack on a Kelthran vessel. Ambassador Chen responded with careful precision. He corrected the chairman politely but firmly. The attack had not been unprovoked. The Kelthran fleet had entered human space with hostile intent. They had demanded surrender. They had threatened destruction. They had attempted to target a human facility. The satellite had responded with minimum necessary force to disable the threat. Earth's defense doctrine was clear. Humanity would not fire the first shot. But they would absolutely fire the second one. Counselor Vresh asked the question that everyone wanted answered. She asked about human technology. She asked how a species barely out of its own solar system had developed weapons capable of threatening ships that carried the collective technological advancement of 50,000 years. She asked if humanity had received help from another power. She asked if they had discovered ancient technology. She asked for the truth. Ambassador Chen smiled. It was not a hostile expression, but it carried something that made several council members uncomfortable. He said that humanity had received no outside help. He said they had discovered no ancient artifacts. He said that every weapon, every defense, every technological advancement had been developed by human scientists working in human laboratories with human resources. Then he explained how. He said that humanity had been at war with itself for its entire recorded history. Not centuries of war. Not millennia. Thousands of years of continuous conflict interrupted by brief periods of uneasy peace. Humans had spent more time fighting each other than any species in the galactic database. They had developed weapons to kill their own kind with ever-increasing efficiency. They had built defenses to protect against weapons they themselves had created. They had turned the art of warfare into a science more refined than any other aspect of their civilization. When humanity finally achieved faster-than-light communication and detected signals from the galaxy beyond, they did not celebrate. They did not assume peaceful intentions. They prepared for war. Every nation on Earth had contributed resources to the defense project. Every scientist had worked on weapons development. Every engineer had focused on creating shields and armor and offensive capabilities. They had studied every Kelthran transmission they could intercept. They had analyzed every weakness in Kelthran technology. They had spent 30 years preparing for the moment when the Empire came calling. Ambassador Chen said something else. He said that the satellite that had disabled the Kelthran warship was not humanity's most advanced weapon. It was not even close. He said that Earth possessed defensive capabilities that made the satellite look like a primitive tool. He said that humanity had prepared for total war against an enemy with 50,000 years of technological advantage, and they had prepared assuming they would win. The council chamber erupted in protest. Multiple representatives demanded proof. Others accused humanity of bluffing. Admiral Zethus, attending the meeting remotely from his flagship, remained silent. He had reviewed the battle recordings 100 times. He had analyzed every detail. He believed Ambassador Chen was telling the truth. Counselor Vresh called for order. She asked Ambassador Chen what humanity wanted. She asked if Earth intended to challenge the established galactic order. She asked if humanity sought war or peace. Ambassador Chen's response was measured and clear. He said that humanity wanted exactly what they had always wanted. The right to exist. The right to defend themselves. The right to determine their own future. He said that Earth would welcome peaceful relations with every species in the galaxy. He said that humanity would honor treaties, respect boundaries, and engage in fair trade. But he also said this. He said that humanity would never submit to any empire. He said that humanity would never surrender their sovereignty. He said that any species that threatened Earth would face the full weight of human defensive capability, and that capability had been specifically designed to fight and win against enemies who should have been able to crush them without effort. The meeting ended with no formal conclusion. The Council agreed to establish diplomatic channels with Earth. They agreed to recognize human territorial claims in their home system. They agreed to treat humanity as a sovereign power worthy of respect. What they did not agree on was what to do next. Half the council wanted to establish friendly relations and hoped that humanity remained peaceful. The other half wanted to find a way to neutralize this new threat before it grew stronger. Admiral Zethus made his own decision that night. He sent a message directly to the Kelthran High Command. He recommended full diplomatic recognition of humanity. He recommended establishing trade agreements. He recommended doing everything possible to ensure that humans remained friendly. His reasoning was simple and brutal. He said that humanity was the most dangerous species he had encountered in 800 years of service. He said they were dangerous not because they had powerful weapons, but because they had spent their entire existence learning how to fight enemies stronger than themselves. He said that trying to conquer or control them would result in a war that the Empire might not win. His message ended with a single observation that would be remembered long after he died. He said that the galaxy had spent 50,000 years believing that technological advancement led to peace. He said that older, wiser species naturally dominated younger ones. He said that civilization was about moving beyond primitive violence. Then he said that humanity proved all of those assumptions were wrong. He said that humans had advanced technology specifically to make themselves better at violence. He said they had become civilized without ever becoming peaceful. He said they were what every prey species dreamed of becoming and what every predator species feared to face. The galaxy would spend the next century trying to understand humanity. They would study human history. They would analyze human psychology. They would attempt to explain how a species could be simultaneously sophisticated and savage, intelligent and aggressive, capable of creating beautiful art and devastating weapons. They would never fully understand. But they would learn to respect the species that looked at the most powerful empire in the galaxy and politely declined to surrender.